I think one of the biggest issues here, of course, Senator, has been the disgraceful handling of the government in the post-High Court decision. Now, the High Court made its decision. We were told that, well, there's nothing we can really do about it. High Court's made its decision. But then we can come up with some legislation a few days later that apparently we've been preparing for months, but then they needed Peter Dutton to help plug a lot of the holes in all of it. And we even learned tonight via reporting that I think's in the Financial Review, let me double check my number here, is that now the number of people that have been released as a result, we're now at 141 people. They thought this thing was going to be like the Syrian brides coming back from the ISIS brides, sort of 2-day story, blow up on Sky News. Well, guess what? It wasn't, it isn't, and I think it's one of the concrete shoes that they're wearing at the moment.
Paul, it would be a big mistake for me or any of my colleagues to do a victory lap after one competitive news poll. We know we've got a lot more work to do to earn the trust of the Australian people, and we are on our way to doing that. But I agree with you. I'm not surprised after the shocking 2 weeks that the government has had that it's taken a hit. And you're absolutely right. I mean, they were caught napping by the High Court. They did not anticipate this decision. They were not prepared for this decision. They weren't ready to act to protect the community when this decision was handed down. And it took a very messy week of scrambling and pressure from us and the media before they finally realised that they should act, after initially saying they wouldn't do anything until the High Court handed down its published reasons, which will be sometime next year. Even then, what they introduced was far too weak and had to be significantly strengthened by the way of 6 amendments that we put forward. And now we have this daily drip of finding out how many more people are beyond the single applicant to the High Court who have been released. If it's in the 140s, as you say, that's news to me. I haven't been briefed on that by the government. I'll be asking them about that tomorrow. Right. What I want to know also is how many of those 141 are under electronic monitoring, because the government last week wasn't able to answer that question, wasn't able to say how many of these people are being electronically monitored, as they promised they would be, because we forced them to make that a mandatory condition.
Well, I tell you what, you want to see some, this is again, Clueless Claire O'Neill is lucky about one thing. You're in the upper house, all right? Because I tell you what, we'll see. She'll get the heat tomorrow, and this week, of course, as Parliament's back. But wait, watch and see. Also, again, as I'm trying to read the analysis, while live interpreting all of this as well, apparently the disapproval-approval rating scenario for the Prime Minister is in the realms of Scott Morrison before the 2022 election. Now, let's also take a chill pill here to some degree, which is, Stephen, you have seen governments that are on the rise and the ones that once it falls, it really falls. There's a story that's been given in The Australian tomorrow, which is, more university students should have greater English tests applied to them. Okay. These all feel like a little bit of stop the bleeding along the way. All right, what's the free advice that you want to give from 1,000 kilometres down the road?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's been a couple of stories over the weekend which have indicated the government have a fairly major announcement to make relatively soon around migration levels. The part of the problem, though, when you want to talk about housing, Paul, and you want to talk about rental problems and the lack of supply, is that someone's got to build those houses that we need today. Yep. And if you look at one of the other stories in the papers, there are not enough builders in the country with unemployment between 3% and 4% to actually do that job. And this is where you get the conundrum between wanting to keep the flow of workers needed to keep the economy actually functioning. Providing homes is a fairly basic function of an economy, and the argument around how much migration you want to have. Now, let's be clear about this migration debate. It's 200,000, I think, roughly, is the cap on permanent migration, and a large cohort of this is students who are coming in, and there is specialised student accommodation that is available to them that other Australians don't use. They're specifically purpose-built for student accommodation. So pretending that all of those students who are coming in are suddenly taking away houses and rentals from Australians is just frankly dishonest.
No, but as we've had a look at the real estate information, when there's a rental place available in Ipswich, 121 people turn up for a rental property in Ipswich. Now, I love Ippy. God love CSI, open till 4 a.m. Love it, right? God love River 949. No problems with Ipswich, but that is an example of what we know is the demand versus the supply scenario that's here. Senator, obviously, as Home Affairs, it's not your immediate purview, but immigration does fold in all of this. Can the government find a way to keep both of its masters happy, which is the people who are standing in the ever-growing queues for a variety of services around the country, and the Treasury that quite like the idea that despite the fact they get their numbers wrong all the time, every time, as we all know in both directions, they need to hold on to a surplus going into a political trade-off, which I think now is looking like 2025 rather than late 2024.
Well, Paul, what it will require from the government is for them to take responsibility, lead and make some difficult decisions. I mean, we've had an excuse from them from the last 18 months that they've got no control over the immigration numbers, that there's nothing that they can do about it. And that has led to more than 500,000 people coming to Australia this year. We're probably going to break the all-time record for overseas migration to our country. And the government has been watching, standing by, saying it's completely out of our control. Well, I think they've probably realised that in a cost of living crisis, when you've got a home affordability crisis, a rental affordability crisis, and many other really serious financial pressures on families, that this isn't helping and they might actually have to do something about it, but only after about a year's worth of free advice from our Shadow Immigration Minister, Dan Tehan, who's been pointing this out to them week in, week out. And finally, I think they might belatedly act because they realise it's a real problem for them.
Yeah, well, by the way, of course, remember, of course, they're still pretending that, nothing to do with the Australian government here. Inflation's all something to do with the international... Anyway.